So thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Jessica Connors. I work at Mount Wachusett Community College, and Matt Ledger is here with us from Montechusett Regional
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission. I almost said public. Montechusett Regional Planning Commission, and he's going to be running our session today. So thank you for joining us, and Matt, you can go right ahead.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Hey, everyone. So as Jessica said, my name is Matt Ledger. My title is Principal Planner at the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. That just means I get to do fun things like host conversations like this. I am running what is called the Community Health Assessment for Haywood Hospital and UMass Memorial Health Alliance Clinton Hospital, which is something that these nonprofit hospitals across the country do every 3 years. And basically what we do is we talk to the community, so folks like yourself, and better understand what their healthcare needs and concerns are. And with that information, we go back to the hospitals and say, here's what the community says they need. And then the hospital turns around and creates programs and services to help support you. So youth groups have participated in this before. I've done this report 3 years ago in 2018 with Haywood, and the conversations that I had were really, truly beneficial to helping create new programs that help to serve you and your friends and your colleagues in school, particularly public schools and so forth. So with that, I want to let everyone know this call is being recorded, but it's only for note-taking purposes. So please feel free to be as open and honest about your concerns for the region and yourselves as you're willing to be. Nothing you say will be kind of attributed back to you, so you don't have to worry about the things that you say. I encourage everyone to, if you are comfortable with it, talk to me over Zoom, but you can also type your responses into the chat if you don't want to speak out loud. But with that, we have 2 questions that I want to pose to the group, and I'm just going to let you respond, so anyone can jump in and take a stab at it. So the first question is very open, and there's no right or wrong answer. So you could be as small and focused as you want, or as utopian and big ideas as you want to be. So the first question is, if you were to paint a picture of what a healthy community was, what would that picture look like? So think about things like everyone has access to healthcare, or everyone has a ride to get to their doctor's appointment, right? So something really big, like everyone has access, or something really small, like transportation is not a barrier, right? So I'll leave it open to anyone who wants to take the first stab at that. If you were to paint a picture of a healthy community, what would it look like? And I'm not afraid to call on people either. I will do that. So feel free to just jump in and give me your thoughts. Anyone? Connor, you look brave.
Yeah, okay, sure. So for me, I think it would be a community that has interconnectivity, that has the ability to kind of be open and express itself. So it has inbuilt support systems for, both minor things and more major things, or, from ranging from mental health, not saying that that's minor, but I'm kind of like a separate point here. From mental health, like infrastructure, it should be a democratic community, in my opinion. The consent of all the people should be taken into consideration. There should be, meetings and stuff like that to determine what people want. And it should. I had another point, but I can't remember what it was. So
that's okay. Maybe someone else will inspire or help you kickstart your memory. So that's good. So interconnectivity, openness, democratic processes. The community has a voice and can really drive decision-making for the community. That's a really good way to start. Anybody else have thoughts on what a healthy community is? Or what it looks like? Colin?
I think there's a lot of communities that already exist that do things very well. But I think to improve upon it would be affordability and accessibility. With more people being able to do things, more people are going to having more affordable, even just common things, healthcare, housing, education, having more access and, freedom to do those things and have them ready would improve every aspect of life in those communities.
No, that's really great. Anyone else have anything to add? I saw Nicholas, you take yourself off mute. Did you want to say something?
Oh no, my audio wasn't working.
No problem. Anybody else have any thoughts? There's more to it than that. What does a healthy community look like? Think about things like, diversity, right? People are getting along with each other. What else is there that makes up a healthy community? Nobody? Jessica, maybe do you have a thought on what a healthy community looks like?
So I was actually just going to say that, your voices are super important, and oftentimes we find that your ideas are not necessarily things that we would think of. So your feedback is really important, and we, appreciate you taking the time and giving us any ideas and feedback that you might have. For me, I think a healthy community, especially right now, would be one that is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and healthcare access, most definitely, and people who don't have to worry about, maybe how they're going to get even things such as their monthly medicines. Speaking from people that I know, that would be really important. So I know it's hard to put yourself out there sometimes, but any ideas that you have would be most welcome.
Yeah, you could talk from your personal experience. You can talk from that of people that you know who have struggled to access the healthcare needs that they have. Like I said, this is something that we've talked to youth in the past, and we actually created real programs that were designed to help students like yourself. We don't know what you need unless you tell us, right? And so this is super, super important. To keep the conversation going, Colin, if you don't mind me calling back on you, you said the word accessibility a couple of times. And so I want to pick on you and ask you what you mean when you say accessible. So you said affordable was one thing, right? So that's something, if it's affordable, that's one way that it's accessible. But what other ways are healthcare needs made accessible, right? So think about like transportation, for example. If that's a barrier, if you close that barrier or bridge that gap, then that's no longer a problem for people, and it's now accessible, right? So do you have any other thoughts on other ways that healthcare needs to be made more accessible?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of even simple ways you can make healthcare easily accessible through transport, or even location, having more, even smaller buildings in smaller towns or bigger cities interconnecting. And then through different transport, location, even
Colin, we might have lost your audio. That's okay. Well, oh, there you are. Sorry,
yeah.
You cut out for the last 10 seconds or so.
Transport or location, or even doing I've got a thought. I can't. Yeah, I think, one sec. Let me hold on that thought.
Okay, no problem. For those who just joined, first of all, thank you. We're having a quick focus group conversation about what does a healthy community look like in your mind. If you were given a blank canvas and the ability to paint a picture of what that looks like, what would you paint? So that's the first question. And then we're about to transition over to the second question, but I want to give folks a chance to kind of explain to me, and the purpose for this is to help me understand the types of things that you need, right? So when you tell me that a healthy community looks like this, you're telling me that this is what we need, right, in order to be healthy. So that helps me inform the report that I'm putting together to help create programs for you. So anybody else, thoughts on that? What does a healthy community look like to you?
So I think that, and this is hard to give. Well, maybe there's some kind of policy you can enact, but personally, I don't know what you would do. But I think that a very strong sense of community is a crucial and very important thing. At the same time, needs to be done in tandem with autonomy and making sure that people feel comfortable being independent and that they aren't, they personally don't feel as if their wills are being filled over. So I think you need to have the greatest amount of respect for the most amount of people, most amount of cultures, open, make sure things are open and ideas are readily exchangeable and stuff like that.
That's really good. You were broken up a little bit, Connor, but if I can I'll repeat back to you what I heard and then you tell me if that was correct. So big thing I heard from you was people need to feel like they have a sense of community. So they have something that they belong to, or a group or a broader community or something along those lines. A sense of empowerment, if I could summarize one of the other things that you said, were like people feel like they have the tools and resources to go and care for themselves and their needs and to go get help when they can't help themselves. And then the other part was, I think I heard like cultural awareness. So just, we have an understanding of like what are the needs of different cultures and communities, and we're serving them effectively and making room for people who are otherwise often not included, right? So that summarize accurately what you're saying? Great. Anybody else thoughts on what a healthy community looks like if you were given a broad blank canvas to paint a picture? What does that healthy community look like?
Not as much politics.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest problem I've heard so far. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? Talk about why politics is an inhibitor of making for a healthy community?
I mean, most of the people in this world are fighting because of all the stuff politics based. So maybe if they ease down on politics, it would make it a better community.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that is definitely true and definitely a big problem that we need to address. Anybody else thoughts on what makes a healthy community? I know we've said a lot of things. Brian, did you have a thought? Or is that just your hand is off to the side? No, okay.
It was my hand
Okay.
the side,
Okay.
so
No worries. Okay. Looks like someone dropped something in the chat here. Let's see. Yeah, time is a big issue. There's a million and one things we all need to take care of, and finding the time to just take care of yourself or to go to a doctor's appointment sometimes is a major barrier. And time is something you can't change, right? So how do we then create the support systems that help to make things more accessible? And I think that's super important. I think telehealth particularly is a really, really good way of closing that barrier where, you don't have to get on a bus to get to your doctor's appointment, or you don't have to get in your car and get stuck in traffic. You can just hop on a Zoom call, talk to your doctor really quickly about something, and then, take further action from there. That is huge. And then of course you need like better broadband access, right? In order to make that more accessible to people in areas where broadband isn't as strong or fast. So yeah, that's a really important point, Colin. So thank you for putting that in the chat. So if there's no other thoughts, I have a second question I want to pose to the group. This one is a little bit more fun, and hopefully you can get me some creative ideas. Now, we've talked about what a healthy community is to you, right? So we said one that's interconnected and open, and it's democratic, so there's involvement on all sides of the coin to help make things happen. Things are affordable, accessible, it's diverse and equitable, and everybody is included in that. We have a sense of community and individual empowerment, and then cultural awareness and things of that nature. And then, time, right? Being able to access and so on and so forth. Now, imagine you were given $1 billion to start tomorrow on moving the needle towards your definition of a healthy community. What would you invest your dollars in, right? And you don't have to be you don't have to budget out for me what you would do, but just imagine you had unlimited resources to start building communities, to start making things more affordable for people. What would you do on day one? So to give you an example, for me, the first thing I would do, particularly around telehealth, is to expand broadband access into what are called disconnected neighborhoods. So people who don't have the most up-to-date high-speed broadband, believe it or not, some people are still using dial-up, which probably most of you on this call don't even know what that is. It is the internet that I grew up with in the 90s, in the early 2000s, that makes a really weird sound when you're trying to log on to the internet. Some people in the country still have that because just where they are located is super rural and disconnected from the rest of, this is a horrible way to say it, but society, right? They're kind of off in the woods somewhere. It's too expensive to bring broadband to those neighborhoods, so they don't have it. So that's one thing I would invest $1 billion in tomorrow, is to start connecting those disconnected neighborhoods and houses. So what would you do with $1 billion tomorrow?
I'd probably, first thing I'd do would be to buckle down on essential workforce. So more and better trained police force, give more equipment and access to fire, increase healthcare and add more, healthcare spaces everywhere, including, rural areas. And because having more, I'd say having more essential work and getting those super essential needs out everywhere will make every other process that needs to be improved easier to improve.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Connor, maybe some ideas about how you empower individuals. Do you have any thoughts on what you would invest your dollars in?
No, I don't really. Nothing. I guess the big one that I specifically tend to go towards is healthcare. That's fully accessible, because I don't think that I don't personally think you should be spending for anything that right to life is something that, I don't really have any good points though right now. I don't think so. I'll tell you if I do think of something better.
No, that's okay. So like for me, individual empowerment, right, in the healthcare system in particular, a lot of people don't know just what information they're looking at, right? So when they're given, like, oh, we have all these programs available, or they make some sort of like data set available to the public about, healthcare needs or services in the region, just helping people understand what they're looking at. Right. So giving them better information, making that information digestible. So I would invest in, putting together a program that helps to translate really complex healthcare information into something that's really like baseline and understandable for people, so they know what it is that they're getting. And part of that is a marketing budget. Sometimes there's a lot of healthcare programs available, but no one knows about it because the money that went into creating it didn't allow for a marketing budget to promote to the community that they have this, right? So the community doesn't know, and then this program's available and then no one uses it, money gets wasted, right? So that's another way that you can empower people, is with information, right? So anybody else thoughts on where you'd invest your $1 billion if you were given it? Maybe Tristan or Jose, I haven't heard from either of you. Any thoughts? This question, oh, Jessica, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I had one, and I didn't talk about it the first time, but I think that I would probably start investing in easier and more access to healthy food choices. Produce boxes and things like that, especially for rural communities who may not have as easy access to that. And for all, that would be something I would start my investment in.
Mm-hmm. Anybody thoughts on how we actually achieve that? Anybody at all?
We know
I'll
it's
let you
early.
answer.
We know it's early, guys.
This question is particularly important because I'm asking you it without, I don't want to probe you into giving me a particular answer. I want you to tell me, if the hospital gave, $1 million to the community benefits program, which is the program I'm doing this report for, if the hospital gave them $1 million to start serving your population, right, with a particular program. I'm asking you this question because I want to know what to tell them where to invest their dollars. So if you tell me that the number one thing that your community needs, just to throw an example out there, is more telehealth services, I'm going to tell them at this youth program that I held, they asked for telehealth. So they're going to know that that's what you want. But if you don't tell me, then I don't know what to tell them, right? So where should I invest the dollars that they give me in programs to help you?
Hmm.
I know it's a big question, but this is important stuff. Tristan, any thoughts? I see you put in the chat into places that we need it. Where do we need it? Do you have maybe just one place? Do you have a thought on where you think money needs to be thrown? Do you mean school supplies, healthcare supplies? Okay, no, that's great. That's helpful. Anybody else? Thoughts on where you'd invest your dollars?
I think telehealth, having investment in that would be really helpful, but I think there's still a lot of use in physical healthcare. So I think putting a lot of investment into urgent care and, the services of, EMT and a lot of, emergency healthcare would also be very helpful as someone who's needed its services multiple times.
No, that's super helpful. And I also want to pose another idea too that might help fuel this conversation a little bit. So with this report, we're talking about something called the social determinants of health. So if you haven't heard of this before, basically what it means is people have a holistic view of health when they're looking at community health. So it's not just about literally getting to the doctor and getting the healthcare that you need or getting the medicines that you need, right? We're also talking about housing, right? So healthy housing conditions that you live in. The schools are adequately funded, right? And are performing well. Transportation is accessible to as many people as you can make it accessible to, right? So these are the holistic way that we look at health. Now, the problem with the healthcare system, and it's something that we're trying to address with this particular report and our programs that we provide after, are we need to invest more in those social determinants, right? So most money in the healthcare system, about 80% of the money that gets poured into improving health goes into hospitals and urgent cares and emergency centers and such of that, which those are reactive things, right? So those are things that are in place once something has happened to you already. What we want to do is create conditions that help to prevent those things from ever happening, so that you don't need necessarily to go to an urgent care or an emergency room, right? So putting conditions in place that help you prevent healthcare problems from popping up. So Connor, thoughts on that?
I think another thing, I don't know why I think so look at this. I may be biased because I'm going into college. Helping with making college much more affordable is a big thing, because some people don't go to college because they simply don't want to, obviously, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're not going to college is for financial reasons, then college does give you more opportunities. And again, it's not like if you go to college. Oh, can you not hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. But if you go to college, you're going to get more opportunities. You're going to have the ability to likely I would imagine, have more wealth, I suppose, which in that sense actually goes back to the healthcare, because if it's more affordable for you, you're not going to be in that financially insecure position where it's going to be that much of a problem. I mean, it's still, healthcare is not a very thing, but so it's not going to always help. But I think it would definitely be helpful.
Yeah, no, education is huge. I appreciate that, and as someone with a lot of college debt myself, I would definitely appreciate some more solutions around how to fix that. Anybody else, thoughts on where you'd invest your money to make for a more healthy community?
Actually, talking on overall community health, I've noticed in my town and in a lot of surrounding towns just in my area, there are so many condemned or destroyed or, structurally unstable buildings and areas that just aren't used. And it's a lot of wasted land. And having those, destroyed and then reused as soon as possible, there could be so many more things that are being put in, so much more space that could be used for so many things that right now are being used for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big one, and I appreciate that. Anyone thoughts on what we would do? So let's just say there's 100 lots that have destroyed houses that are just sitting vacant. What would you do with that space if you were given the money to knock all those houses down? Would you build more housing? Would you create a community space? Community gardens is another cool idea that you can put in some of these spaces. What would you do with that space if you had it?
I will like build more houses.
No, that's great. So individual houses or more like apartment buildings or something like that?
More like envision houses and apartment houses.
That's great. Anybody else thoughts on what you would do with that space? For me, I would definitely create, as Connor was talking about earlier, space for community type events. Sometimes we have things, I live in Fitchburg, so we have like a couple of parks. We have the YMCA are places where the community tends to congregate, but some of these places are a little bit disconnected or out of reach for some people. So if we could create more green spaces to do some more community events, more people would get out of their houses. I think particularly now with the pandemic and COVID-19 and stuff, it's really important that people get outside and kind of get moving again. I think I'm very stiff from sitting in my office all day, every day. And I probably gained more weight than I probably should have. So one of my big things is I want to get outside more. But where I live, there's not a ton of green space for me to just go do that. I have to walk in the street, which is not exactly the safest thing I have a young daughter. She's 4 months old now. So it's not the safest thing in the world for me to just go walking down the street, right? So I would love to have more green space near me. Jessica, did you have a thought?
I just wanted to let you know that, so in the Hoover Q&A, Garrett put affordable housing would be really important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even, I don't know where you guys are all living right now, but for me, the rent where I live in Fitchburg has just gone up, pretty substantially in just the last couple of years. And part of the reason for that is there's a lack of supply of housing. So, if there was more housing, the cost of all that would go down, make it more affordable for me to live, my family to live. So I think that's a hugely important point. And then people can afford more healthcare or the other types of things that they need, right? So housing is huge. It's a really big one. Anybody else? It doesn't have to be about the green space either. If there's something else that you think that we should be doing and investing our dollars in, what would it be?
Investing it toward the homeless and giving food and all that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think this region in particular has a growing homelessness problem, and it's not often talked about. And I think that's hugely important. So getting resources like food and so on and so forth to the homeless, that's really important. What else?
See, I'm not exactly sure how this gets invested in, but one thing that would help what we would see as a perfect community is a drop in taxes, or at least take off some forms of tax, and in place of that, things like leveling out a minimum wage, or finding ways to, instead of paying money directly to the government through taxes, find ways to work with whatever community's government we have to help everyone at the same time. And especially in how we've been saying, an extremely democratic, perfect community where everyone is involved, having money and something set in place where rather than the government making the people's choices, have the people make the people's choices would help.
Yeah, that's that is a particularly big one. And I think a couple of times I've had 8 or so focus groups that I've held before this one. And one thing that people keep saying is, if you don't live in Boston or the greater Boston area, everywhere else in Massachusetts is often fighting for resources, and scrapping over what little money is left after all the money's been dumped into greater Boston. And so one thing that's been brought up is that we need a rallying cry. We need people from our community to go and advocate at the Massachusetts State House and say, our communities are struggling with this and we don't have the money for it, or we don't have the resources to do it. Anyone thoughts on how we can kind of rally the community around an effort like that? I know it's really hard. Again, we've talked about how time is an issue. And so we have to find time in our day to make that happen. But if we don't do it, we're not going to get the stuff that we need, right? So anyone thoughts on how we can kind of rally the community to make that happen? Sometimes it's a matter of youth standing up and saying it, right? You know, adults, don't tell anyone I said this, I'm going to get in trouble, but adults tend to complain a lot. And so there's lots of adults fighting over stuff. But when the kids stand up, people listen, right? They don't get ignored because they're the future, right? So anyone thoughts on maybe getting a youth group together to go advocate for some of the things that we've talked about?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Aside from non-peaceful protests, which have been seen on the news, people have been, standing up for themselves in really good ways for a while, especially with the situations that we're in. So there are, possibilities of us just, starting some protests, some awareness spreading. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a good start. I know you got interrupted there, Colin, but yeah, I think more of that is needed. And if we can get younger generations involved, I think it's going to really move the needle on this stuff. So there's one thing you take away from this call is start standing up. If you haven't already, which, I mean, you're in this group right now. So if you're in this group right now, you're advocating for yourself, right? That's the whole point of this focus group. But there's a larger system that also serves you, that needs to know how to serve you. So I encourage everybody to stand up peacefully and organize and advocate for what you need. We've got a few more minutes. Does anybody else have thoughts on things? Or it could be a question that I haven't asked, or a thought that you had about the healthcare needs of the area that we just haven't talked about. I want to give people a chance to kind of just give me their general thoughts. Doesn't have to be about the questions I've asked. You can talk about challenges, and challenges that you've seen. Doesn't have to necessarily be for yourself. You can say, oh, I have a bunch of friends who struggle with this, or I have, their families are struggling with having access to a car, or something along those lines, right? For me in this region, I think one of the big things I'm passionate about is there's just not really very good jobs around for people, good, stable, career boosting jobs, right? So that's one thing I would love to invest in. Anyone thoughts on the types of challenges that people are experiencing that you're seeing?
I mean, actually, early workforce is important to a lot of us, especially seeing as we are the next generation of, workers, a lot of us heading into our first jobs in either this year or in just a couple of years. So having a workforce that's not only more stable, but also more plentiful is essential to getting this next generation of the workforce started right.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think that's a particularly acute problem with the pandemic is younger generations are struggling to enter the workforce. And so to the extent that we can help people get into the workforce and stay there is going to be huge. So providing workforce supports for youth is a good way to summarize that. Anybody else? There's got to be something. we've only got a couple of minutes. This is a really important conversation. Anybody else have thoughts on what we could be doing to make our communities healthier around us? Okay. All right. I mean, that's pretty much all the questions I had for you guys. So we came up with a lot of good stuff, and I think this is going to be hugely valuable. And I think Haywood Hospital and UMass Memorial and Leominster are going to be coming back to the community in a couple of months after we've kind of gathered all this data, and coming back to folks like yourself for comment on the types of on the report and what it says and what we could do next. And so I encourage you all. I'm going to try to connect with Lauren Mountain, who, if you don't know her name, she organized pretty much this whole event. I'm going to come back to her and say, you know, we'd love to get some youth voices on just reacting to this report that we put together. So be on the lookout for that. That should be around August time. So it's a little bit of ways away. This is a big project and a lot of people I need to talk to, but that's going to be really where your voices count towards figuring out what comes next. So appreciate everybody's thoughts and time today. I'll give you the last couple of minutes left to, you know, step away before you go to your next thing, take a break. But I really appreciate everyone's time today and for your thoughts. So yeah.